I would deeply love to one day make a James Bond movie. It's a character that I've been with, like everybody, like since my childhood, and it's like I have like massive affection for Bond.
So, guys, welcome to another episode of Really 007, and thank you so much again for joining us in this series titled James Bond Will Return. This is the 10th episode, and we actually started this series just under 2.5 years ago, I think in March or something. But now we have a very big breakthrough in June. Have you got it? Yeah, very good. And tonight we've got a great cast. In fact, yeah, let's introduce who we're chatting with tonight. We've got our regular team, minus Rob and Chris. We've got Math,
Hello.
Tom,
Good evening.
and those two are brothers of mine. This chap is not. This is John.
All right.
Just a friend, just friend. Yeah, so thank you for joining me, gents. And we're all a bit excited with progress that's being made. And just as a recap, our last two episodes in this series kind of looked at Amazon taking creative control, and then the news that there'd be two new producers, David Heyman and Amy Pascal. And now we have in this 10th episode something even more significant, really, a lot more. It's not quite the casting of James Bond, but it's the next biggest thing. This 10th episode is simply called Denis Villeneuve because, ladies and gentlemen, we have our director.
Whoa.
Anyway, before we press on, we must let you know about all the ways that you can tune in to our podcast and follow us on socials. John, name one place where people can follow us.
Instagram.
Tom?
Facebooks.
Math?
Twitter.
Sorry?
X.
And then, of course, there are ways to listen to our podcast through the usual podcast stations, wherever you download from and tune in. And as well, like you're seeing if you're watching us, we're on YouTube and we've got loads of videos for you guys to maybe now with a new invigoration, like to go back and watch all our interviews with cast members, crew who've been involved with the films, and just as fans talking about this wonderful world of James Bond. So do look us up, do follow us, and do support us. We're in for a very exciting ride ahead. So yes, let's talk about it. Canadian director Denis Villeneuve has been officially revealed as the confirmed director of Bond 26. And this news kind of came out through the media before any official word from the Amazon MGM studios or anything like that. Articles were coming out, and I think, Tom, you shared it with us in the wee hours, and some of us woke up to the news on WhatsApp. We had news pretty much laying out officially Denis Villeneuve is going to be the director of Bond 26. Now, if I just read you some of that article, because this is kind of how the news broke to us. The next James Bond chapter has begun. This was from Yahoo News, actually. The next James Bond chapter has begun. Denis Villeneuve, the visionary behind Dune, Blade Runner 2049, and Arrival, has been tapped to direct the next James Bond film for Amazon MGM Studios, the company announced on Wednesday. Villeneuve will also executive produce alongside Tanya Lapointe, Amy Pascal, and David Heyman. Now, just as a side, Amy Pascal and David Heyman, we already knew about. Tanya Lapointe is someone who's executive produced with the Dune films and is his wife. And they are going to be shepherding, I'll carry on with the article, shepherding the franchise and producing for Amazon MGM after taking over from Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. A new 007 still has not been selected, but here comes a quote from a statement made by Denis himself. Some of my earliest movie-going memories are connected to 007. I grew up watching James Bond films with my father, ever since Dr. No with Sean Connery. I'm a die-hard Bond fan, Villeneuve said in a statement. To me, he's sacred territory. I intend to honour the tradition and open the path for many new missions to come. This is a massive responsibility, but also incredibly exciting for me and a huge honor. Amy, David, and I are absolutely thrilled to bring him back to the screen. Thank you to Amazon MGM Studios for their trust. And then the other quote that I'd like to share with you from the same article and from many other articles is from Mike Hopkins, who's the head of Prime Video and Amazon MGM Studios, because he commented this: "We are honored that Denis has agreed to direct James Bond's next chapter. He is a cinematic master whose filmography speaks for itself. From Blade Runner 2049 to Arrival to the Dune films, he has delivered compelling worlds, dynamic visuals, complex characters, and, most importantly, the immersive storytelling that global audiences yearn to experience in theatres. James Bond is in the hands of one of today's greatest filmmakers, and we cannot wait to get started on 007's next adventure." And then Pascal and Heyman also said in a statement, sorry, Heyman, Denis Villeneuve has been in love with James Bond movies since he was a little boy. It was always his dream to make this movie, and now it's ours too. We are lucky to be in the hands of this extraordinary filmmaker. I don't know about you, but I read the news, and we'll talk about kind of how we greeted, but then how we kind of understood the news. But then those quotes, I think, were pretty fabulous, I have to say. Just talk about Denis Villeneuve to start with and kind of go through his filmography. A few of those films just got mentioned, as you heard there. Some of them, the more recent ones, are obviously very, very successful, very famous. And if I go back, though, it started in 1998 with August 32nd on Earth and went through quite a few until really 2010 when John will talk about Incendies, followed by Prisoners in 2013, and he also released Enemy in the same year. 2015 was Sicario. A year later was Arrival. 2017 there was Blade Runner 2049, and then in 2021 was Dune. 2024 Dune Part 2, and that brings him up to date with us. Now, very quick question, guys, to kind of introduce the voices, the views and opinions of Math, John, and Tom. I'd like to know just where you stand on Denis Villeneuve before this news broke. What are your thoughts on him as a director, on his films before him being even considered or aligned with James Bond? John, why don't you go first? It doesn't need to be a long spiel, but just kind of where you were with Denis before this.
So, what my thoughts on him as a director?
Yeah.
The best directors in the world at the moment in time, I'd say, as a starting point. I think I'm admittedly not a massive sci-fi fan, so I very much veer towards his older filmography. Incendies, Prisoners, Sicario, Arrival. I know Enemy was in between that, but which I'm not as big on. But if you had those four together, you're talking like Spielberg levels of consistency, really, in terms of one after another. I think my view on Villeneuve has always been I'm going to be he's I don't think he's original. I think you can really see influence from of his he's a bit of a magpie, I think, in how he directs and actually how he tells stories sometimes. But I'm perfectly all right with that. I love Noel Gallagher and he's the king of magpie stuff. That doesn't bother me massively. I'm not into original. I think he's a phenomenal auteur, and I think what he puts to screen is compelling. And I do think a Villeneuve film is an event, and that is going to stand you in good stead for James Bond.
I think I've said before on this series that Amazon will want a name for each and every role. They'll want the best in class, the Simon Jordan phrase. So I'm not surprised that they've gone after this group. And it looks like, if you remember, a week ago, there was an article that leaked and then was soon to be erased shortly after that had Denis Villeneuve amongst other pretty prominent filmmakers on their list. I know we had Alfonso Cuarón and then he seemed to be distanced from it. I mean, the thing about all these rumors are they all come true, haven't they? They're not, they were all real. So the fact that we heard Alfonso Cuarón was out of the running And then these few names, maybe Denis Villeneuve was the only name, and they thought the press, we'll let you have a few of those, but can you mention these guys as well? Or maybe, just maybe, James Bond's the best franchise that ever was, and people really want to make a James Bond film, and they've been pitching to the biggest production company now, really, in the world, which gets me really excited. So to hear that he's pitched for it is really, really encouraging.
Mm.
I think in terms of him, in terms of Denis Villeneuve, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan, but he's never done a bad film. He's never done a film that hasn't been anything other than critically acclaimed. I've never known any criticism of him as the director. I think maybe certain styles or like John said, the genres, I would lean towards. I thought Prisoners is one of the best thrillers in the last 15 years. Absolutely outstanding film. I saw Enemy quite recently. Very odd. Again, they're not films that scream, "Oh, James Bond." Hardly any of them are. But I'm not really bothered about that either because we need someone who can, as his quote says, take it to the next level. So, sort of like honor the tradition, but continue the legacy. This is the most important directorial appointment in the series history. Let's get that straight. So, yeah, I mean, going through, I think Sicario was superb. Arrival, I've only seen it once. It was all right. I don't quite, I'll have to see it again now because I'm going to rewatch them. Blade Runner was very, very, very good. Sorry, Matt, probably better than the original. I know.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I know you can't say that, can you? As famously, I've tried Dune 2 or 3 times. I can't, and I don't understand it. But I'm going to have to try it again now to go through. So I think Calvin Dyson said the same thing actually. But yeah, I think he's someone who people will get behind who don't know Bond. If people are thinking of James Bond as this sort of out of date action hero and are cinema lovers, they'll be like, oh gosh, I'll be really interested to see what he can do with it. And I think doing it with his wife as well, that sort of creates that legacy, that partnership, babishly like the Nolan brothers have the wives as producers. I think there's something quite wholesome about it, and the fact that the two producers are already in. It's just get the best people who know what they're doing, and I think we're in good hands. I think.
Amazing, guys. This is super. This is just a starting point as well.
Ever since, so Prisoners was the first film of his that I saw. I don't know whether you were there, but watched it with mum and dad at the cottage and thought, whoa, this is pretty good. Like, they don't seem to make thrillers like that anymore. I think if it were out now, they'd probably want it as a mini series, but it's absolutely a brilliant film. And then, saw there's this film Sicario, which is by, the director of Prisoners. So, like, I always wanted to watch that. Ended up watching that, I think, at home here and thought it was amazing. Then went to the cinema with Harry Lord and Luke Hobson to watch Arrival, and we absolutely loved it. Luke was like, "It saw into my soul" or something like that. So it's absolutely brilliant. And then yeah, Blade Runner. I thought I was excited when I heard that he was doing a sequel to Blade Runner because whilst I do appreciate the original Blade Runner, I think I do like it. But I think almost what he did with Blade Runner 2049 is like, I don't know, how he made that world feel the same world, not look so CGI, and I think the level of world building in that film is amazing. I can understand, it's maybe a bit slow and not, some people might have thought it would be a bit more of an action adventure sci-fi than like a more of a drama. But I think it's absolutely brilliant. And then yeah, the Dune films. So the first one, when I first watched it, I thought, wow, like it's amazing. Again, the world that he's built and that he's showing, and that again, a bit like Blade Runner 2049. It's like stuff, it looks practical and real and stuff that you can touch, but obviously a lot of it can't be. Um, I wasn't
hugely immersed in the story. But then when I've watched it again and got more into it, and just with the Zimmer soundtrack and stuff, it's such an awesome experience. And then went to watch Dune Part Two at the cinema, and yeah, that was incredible at the IMAX. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think when we've thought about directors, there hasn't been such obvious candidates. But um, I don't think, maybe other than Christopher Nolan, there is anyone who is as revered as a filmmaker at this moment, and someone who, out of all the list of names and everything, he doesn't need this for his CV. I don't think he doesn't need. I don't think he needs to do this in order to prove himself, or or for money, or as a stepping stone, like this is I think, and I hope because he really loves it, and he's probably had an idea for it for ages. But and I know we'll discuss, but I've always loved, if he wasn't doing Bond and he was doing another project, and I'd be really interested to see what that was, and would probably go along and watch it.
Yeah, it's interesting because he is, as we've kind of you guys have summed up, these big films, successful, the critics like them, they've got a lot of fans. But in some respects, they're not for everyone, his films. So they're not like universally popular, if you know what I mean. They're not, there are some, quite a big portion of cinema goers that they wouldn't be their cup of tea. For me personally, I do remember when we first watched Prisoners and echoing your thoughts there. I think Matthew then recommended Sicario to me, which I watched maybe on my own and was absolutely blown away by the mood of it and the tension throughout, the characters that, I mean, the stuff the way it all builds, and Benicio del Toro's character, Emily Blunt's character, just incredibly portrayed. And then Arrival, I didn't see it this. Did I see it at the cinema? Yes, I did. I saw it at the cinema with a friend, a colleague, and I absolutely loved it. Felt very emotional. Whereas Prisoners, I felt kind of there was emotion because of those family links. Sicario, it was like thriller, complete excitement. What a well-made film. Arrival was more of an emotional, spiritual. I mean, maybe it's like what you said about Luke, but it did feel pretty emotional by the end of that film. And then I remember Blade Runner perhaps coming out. I don't know if I was out of the country or if I'd just had a kid, and it meant that I couldn't go to the cinema to watch it. So I was very late to the day seeing that, and maybe on my small screen, so not quite the same experience, but I loved it, really enjoyed it. I agree with all the things you said. There is a noticeable pace difference, though, between the original and Blade Runner 2049. And I think that'll be kind of one of the things that we think about with Denis Villeneuve in terms of world building is absolutely incredible. But I mean, you especially see it in the Blade Runner films, how Villeneuve's approach is to slow things down and immerse yourself in a world. But I enjoyed it. And then Dune again, I was late to the party watching that many, many years late. Watched it on my own, but on a decent sized telly, and I thought it was absolutely unbelievable at the first watch. I thought like I don't know if I've seen anything really like it yet. At the same time, this I could imagine coming out when we were children and being a classic that we shouldn't have watched because we were too young, and being kind of amazed by the world because it does feel so real. It's incredibly made. I love the characters. I absolutely love the characters in it, and especially the villains. There is a real horrible fear of the villains in that film. There's like an evil in both films that's just like overwhelming, and that is down to Denis Villeneuve's vision. Like there's this amazing presence of threat and a hero in these dark times or whatever. And then I did see part two at the cinema and was just amazed again to see it on the big screen. Again, it was like love at first sight, kind of. Absolutely loved it. And now, kind of, whenever I get a free night to possibly watch a film, I'm looking for a Villeneuve type film, but I'm frustrated that I've kind of seen almost all of them. But that is very much what I'm into at the moment. Very much serious, ambitious, emotional, all those things, the action and all sorts. And I'd like him and Christopher Nolan are my absolute favorite directors at the moment. Absolutely get me really excited about cinema, big films, the lot. So I absolutely love this guy. I mean, we'll get onto it though, because when the shortlist came out just about a week prior to this news, and he was one of five, he was near the bottom of my list to direct Bond. So he is. So if you pair him and Christopher Nolan, I could envisage as being more suited to James Bond than Villeneuve. Villeneuve, for me, which we'll talk about, I was less sure of. So that was kind of an interesting dynamic. And when this news came out, it's kind of, I love him. I'm now starting to kind of, develop my feelings of what a James Bond film would look like directed by him. And in just 24 hours, I mean, it's warming and warming more and more and more, and we'll talk about that. But I love Denis Villeneuve before this news, and now there's a bit of an adjustment for me as a fan of his that he's doing a film from one of my favorite franchise. So it's quite a strange situation we find ourselves in. Like his style, I suppose, is something to talk about to start with. He started in documentaries, and having done some research and kind of into how he would do it, he used to shoot by himself and he would edit everything by himself. So he was kind of the be all and end of all of his projects. And as he's grown, he's obviously, and as his movies have grown, he's taken on a bigger team. And his kind of ethos is a quote of his is talking about making poetry with a camera, which you can kind of understand when you see his films and the kind of the beauty and the slowness of things. And also images before dialogue. That's one of his emphasis. He very much is what you see takes you there. You don't have to be taken there by what the characters are saying, but what you are greeted with on screen takes you there, which is one of his styles. And when we think about his styles, and like I've just touched on, you guys have touched on, there were five directors named last week, and like Tom says, it must have been based on some kind of truth here because those five directors that were shortlisted who were wanting to pitch their ideas for Bond were Edward Berger, who's recently done Conclave. I'll whiz through them because they're famous for a few, but Edgar Wright, most recently Baby Driver, Paul King of the Paddington films, and then Jonathan Nolan, who hasn't done as much. He's been involved with some of the Christopher Nolan, his brother's films, but not in a directorial way. Television series is where he's kind of made his name with like Fallout and Westworld. And then there was Denis Villeneuve. And then, like I say, I was unsure about that. And just if you look at that list, there is a diversity, there's variety amongst that five. Like if you compare Denis Villeneuve to Edgar Wright in terms of what their emphases are on and their priorities are in terms of story, character, dialogue. So it makes me wonder if the directors Heyman and Pascal are like, right, we've got these guys. What do you think of Edgar Wright? What do you think of Villeneuve? They've gone for Villeneuve, haven't they? What do you guys reckon in terms of why do you think Heyman and Pascal have chosen him? Never mind what we think. What do you think they want from Denis Villeneuve?
For me, I think he's the most sustainable of those directors. I think he's a big name who can set a precedent. Edgar Wright is a big name, but he's so ingrained in a style. That'd be very difficult for any other director to kind of continue in a style such as that. And I do think there's a state, I think Tom's spot on, that at the end of the day, James Bond is the crown jewel in Amazon's franchise. Let's get the biggest name we can. And what we've got to remember is that this is not a guy who's just saying he loves James Bond because he's got the job. This is a guy who you can look at interviews from years ago, and he talks about his love for James Bond. And I actually think that I'll compare it to Sam Mendes in some ways. The story with the Sam Mendes one is that it sounds like they tried to get Sam Mendes involved, and especially with Spectre, it's to convince Sam Mendes to come back. This sounds like it's the other way around in some ways. I'm not saying that they have had Denis Villeneuve had to convince, but he's obviously had to put a pitch forward. He's had to think about what this is, and they've obviously gone, wow, this is a guy who can make great films, but we also see the vision of what he's got. And it's not a one-off this is looking at the future. And that's interesting because Heyman and Pascal, their initial producers, it was quite temporary. The language that was used, wasn't it? It wasn't used as a terms of a long-term thing. So there may be even with some thought of some succession planning in that area in the future as well.
I think certainly from both the Heyman and Pascal statement when they were announced, and then Denis Villeneuve's statement, I think you're absolutely right, John. They might not be around forever, but I would definitely read into this that Villeneuve will at least stay on as producer or executive producer for the next one. Bit like Christopher Nolan for Man of Steel, that kind of thing. Where he did get a story credit, didn't he? I think for the first one, and then sort of let it go. But well, they let the whole thing go, didn't they? But that's another story. Yeah, I think looking at those names, it's a pretty babyish list, isn't it? Let's be honest. They are like the most famous named directors who are mainly British. Okay, Christopher Nolan would have been higher, but he's sort of in a league of his own in terms of I think if he'd have been free and wanted it or really gone to them, they probably would have gone for him. But it's this pitch thing that we've got to think about, isn't it? That is so interesting. I again to try and make a prediction. I'd be surprised if he didn't go in with an actor with a sort of general idea. And so, well, he must have gone in if it's a pitch. He must have had an age in mind and some sort of sequence and a pitch doesn't. It could fill me with dread. I could interpret that as well. There doesn't need to be a pitch. It's a James Bond film. I just want him doing a mission. But no, let's be honest. He's got to reboot this. When Sam Mendes came in, it was a mini reboot. And yes, Daniel Craig was the one who wanted him, but he had Daniel Craig. He knew what his style was. He could put his own imprint on it. And comparing him with Sam Mendes is interesting because when your mind's thinking, oh heck, is it another Sam Mendes? Do we not an auteur? And like Sam Mendes, I really like most of his films, but I don't think his Bond films are as good as his other films. And I think he now he's trying to become a Villeneuve. He's trying to become a technician when really he was a character theatre director. And now he's gone a bit gimmicky for me. I'm not, 1917 was just seemed to be an idea that was technically outstanding. But I think Denis Villeneuve, like you say, John, he started out on that craft. Let's not say he's John Glenn, but he has learned the craft of cinema up along the way, rather than been a darling of the theatre industry. Made his first film, American Beauty, way, way more successful than anyone could have imagined, and then let's go into it. And I think until recently, it would have been a bit of a gamble. His films haven't done brilliantly until Dune 2, really. They've all been slightly disappointing. So I don't, but yeah, his reputation has never been harmed by that. A bit like Christopher Nolan with Tenet, it's not, no one's going to be like, oh, he's over the hill now because of his back catalogue, because of his reputation, and anything that's gone wrong with the box office isn't because of him. I don't think it could be attributed to that. So, yeah, I mean, those other names, a bit like Edgar Wright. I love some of his films. I can't stand some of his films. I wouldn't want him anywhere near a Bond film personally. And that, as you say, that I just think I don't want someone too flashy. And although Denis Villeneuve has a style, it's not, what's the word? It's not in your face and showy, I don't think. It is storytelling. There is, like I've said, it's a bit quite dark visually with pockets of light, and that is more maybe that's more him with Roger Deakins, and that's another interesting conversation. So yeah, I think the pitch will be interesting. I think in the next few weeks, months, we'll learn more about that, and I'd be amazed if we didn't have a James Bond cast. Definitely autumn, I reckon.
Jolly exciting, Tom.
I know, I'm getting it.
Yeah. The slightly unusual dynamic as well is that he's done these two Dune films, but Villeneuve's been in the only news you're hearing of Villeneuve recently is that getting ready to do the third one. He's just on the cusp of doing this third one, and it's in pre-production. I don't think it's quite as far along as people think, though. And it'll be interesting to find out what happens with that as a project, whether that's going to come first or whether that has to wait a little bit longer. Villeneuve versus those other candidates, and of course Alfonso Cuarón, he was leading the way for at one point. How do you rate him as the director for Bond 26 compared to those? Because he's the one that's been picked. He's the one that's been chosen.
He's my favorite director of all of those. That's not to say that I was thinking of those five or six that he's definitely the one that I wanted. Um, but I'm evaluating this and reevaluating it all the time because, you know, someone like Paul King, he's done the Paddington films, which he's done really well with, and there's a sort of spirit of adventure there that could possibly, you could possibly see. You know what I mean? Like it's quite hard to translate, but maybe that's where it was. Edgar Wright, yeah, I think it's mainly down to Hot Fuzz. It must be that people because there's like the final third of that is there's some quite good action and good ideas in that, and obviously you got Timothy Dalton there, which probably helped in some people's minds. Like, but I'd be like, oh, imagine if he was still Bond. But
It's
that's
Brosnan,
obviously
the world's end.
yeah. But yeah, Jonathan Nolan. I don't know if I've quite seen enough. Did he do Transcendence? Was that him or was that
That
Wally
was Wally
Pfister?
Pfister, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. No, I don't mean that one. I mean it's another. Well, no, it's not.
Oh, with Ethan
Yes.
Hawke.
Portmanteau with Hugh Jackman.
Yes, I know. What was it with Ben Affleck?
No, was it Ben Affleck or was it Hugh Jackman and
Yes, Hugh Jackson and
what's it called?
gosh,
Can't remember. Sorry, poor research from me. But which was a decent film and everything, and you thought with the Jonathan Nolan link that could bring Christopher Nolan in, but Denis Villeneuve is, and I mean this in the best possible way, the safest option because you'll know what you're getting, and what you're getting is like you say, Tom, isn't going to be, and I'm not saying Edgar Wright would necessarily do this. It'll be interesting to see what the Running Man's like, but cut, trying to sort of show off quite a bit. You feel sometimes for me it's like style over substance. But I never think that with Denis Villeneuve. I think like he's doing this because this is how he thinks is the best way to tell the story. And I don't remember too many overly long, just doing a one shot scene or flat, cut or anything like that. He was the outstanding candidate from that list, and I think they might have thought we might not get a chance to get him again. And as the guys have said, this the chance to relaunch James Bond with a really renowned director, one of the best filmmakers around at the moment, as his, that's what his kind of credit in the bank is. I know box office in the bank hasn't always been great, as you say, Tom, for various reasons, but yeah, it hasn't always connected with cinema going audiences anyway. But I don't think that'll be a problem with this. I think that this will be, you'll get audiences flocking to it. I'm sure of that. This appointment guarantees that it's in the cinema. I know it was always going to be in the cinema, but guarantees that it will be. It guarantees that the film industry will be behind it. That people will sit up and take notice of James Bond, and by getting Denis Villeneuve in it almost says that this is the level that we can get.
Yeah.
This isn't. I'm not sure how many other franchises could have got Denis Villeneuve in. I know, Dune, but that's not necessarily a franchise. Blade Runner is a sequel and stuff like that. And where he is at the moment, like I can't imagine he'd do the next Batman film or a Marvel film or a Superman or anything like that. I think, and his love of Bond is clearly a massive thing, and that's married together with
Yeah.
what. So I'm sure a lot was to do with his pitch and everything, but they might have been. I've been thinking today they might have been mad to turn him down.
And we'll talk about kind of how Bond fans have greeted this news. And Tom, you might be able to provide some stats. So we've put some polls and votes out and stuff like that. We've had comments on our posts. Maybe we'll come on to that. But what you've just mentioned there, Matt, about him being a Bond fan, if I just talk about that for a moment, obviously in this statement alone, he's called himself a die-hard Bond fan. And for me, that just goes such a long way, especially given the recent directors we've had openly saying that they're not Bond fans, and then there just being a trace of that in the output. The final product seems like it's made by someone who's not necessarily a Bond fan. Regardless of your kind of opinions on Denis Villeneuve as a director and his style and what things end up looking like, if he's doing this from a perspective as being a die-hard Bond fan, for me personally, that wins over so much of my heart and my desire to support this. He is a Bond fan like everyone else, which is absolutely amazing. And there's a few quotes through the years. He's not just like John said. He's not just saying this now because he's been pitching and he wants the job. He's been saying it for a while. So there's a quote from the Happy Sad Confused podcast, which he reaffirmed. I think when he was asked, if he would like to ever direct a Bond film, he said, frankly, the answer would be a massive yes. I would deeply love one day to make a James Bond movie. And like Matt said, when you think about Batman, you think about DC, Marvel, other franchises, I can't see him doing those. But it also at the same time just makes you so filled with like amazement. Like this guy loves James Bond. He loves Bond. He says it's a character that I've been with since my childhood. I have massive affection for Bond. I mean, it's just so good. Just hearing someone say that. We do this podcast. We love James Bond as fans. And then you've got someone like Denis Villeneuve saying that. It's just like, wow, let's put to one side what we might think of your films. Thank you so much, Denis, just for saying that. You're already in such a good position. And other things he's talked about, he's said that he's kind of acknowledged that taking over post Daniel Craig would be a huge challenge in other interviews. And like Tom said, this directorial appointment is the biggest in the franchise's history because it navigates the journey from this point. Where you've had Martin Campbell before, he wasn't doing anything that was with new producers on new terms, trying to reach new audiences or anything like this. This is going to, it's a huge thing, and Villeneuve talked about it being a huge challenge. And this might have even been before the whole Amazon dynamic because of Daniel Craig's portrayal dying. Bond 26 was always going to be difficult. And actually, Daniel Craig is a Bond that he has admired. And in a quote, he said, what Daniel Craig brought to Bond was so unique and strong and honestly unmatchable. So he likes Daniel Craig's portrayal of Bond. And he's also I think he's talked about how much he loves Casino Royale and Skyfall as well of Craig's films. I love this. He described making a Bond film as it would be pure cinematic joy. And I know we think of, when we've looked through his filmography, some are dark, some are heavy, some are difficult at times. But just quotes like that make me think he will treat this differently. And he's talked about in his most recent statement about it being sacred. I don't think it's all going to be on what he wants necessarily in his pitch, but obviously he's got this understanding that there's something different about James Bond. it's shared that James Bond films are among his go-to comfort movies. And I love that as well. Not just admiring them as films, but as comfort movies. Again, he's clearly a fan if he's talking like that. He says, this is a direct quote. I'll say that I'm a major Bond fan. There's nothing like a good James Bond to cheer you up. Again, putting some priority on the James Bond film's role to be enjoyed, for films to cheer you up, to take you places, to, as a bit of escape. So he sees it as sacred territory. He is a Bond fan. Guys, it means loads to me saying that, maybe on an emotional level, but I think there is something genuinely really important about the director of Bond 26 being a Bond fan. What, would you not agree?
100%. I think the problem with this is that Amazon have got to set their stall where they have got to have an amazing director who's going to bring out absolute pure cinema. But they've also got to have someone who loves James Bond, because you've got to have somebody who is saying this is still James Bond. So you've got to have someone who understands the character. You know what I mean? It's a massive step because James Bond is popular as it is anyway. So they don't want to be changing that. They want to be getting those ticks that make James Bond who he is and make him so loved. And to get that with the best class director you can and someone who's so passionate about Bond, I think we're going to have an absolute barnstormer of a run, to be honest. I think we're going to go. This is going to be James Bond's version of the Dark Knight trilogy.
I was just about to mention that actually, because even though I'm finding Dune impenetrable at the moment, he's gone from, it's not, everyone will say, oh, it's a bit gloomy and stuff, but that's because of the source material, isn't it? And what he's done with that is the first, okay, still coming out of COVID, wasn't massively successful, but Batman Begins wasn't as big as people think at the box office. But because he had a vision and it wasn't just intended as one film, and the producers obviously put faith in Christopher Nolan, and they're putting faith in Villeneuve for Dune. It's no wonder the second one, like twice as big, the box office,
Mm.
because the people who've seen it on video and everything, and seen it a few times, must love it and must really warm to it. I know Chris isn't here; he prefers the David Lynch, but I don't think we would have wanted David Lynch doing a Bond film personally. uh, but yeah, so it does show that he really takes care with the franchise. And I know you could say it isn't the franchise; he's made it a franchise, really. Let's be honest, because the book's very, very popular, very famous, and it had until that point really been unfilmable. And David Lynch did a really good go of it, but it wasn't. It was even less of a success, wasn't it? I know people do love it now, but to do that, I think it does take the pitch, and I'm absolutely fascinated. I mean, we'll spend years thinking, did he ever pitch to Barbara and Michael? Was that
Mm.
he did? Who knows? Something must have been going on, and then it goes back to what were they doing? And they knew that Christopher Nolan, I reckon he's done a similar thing. I reckon even if it was just in a meeting or a party with where Barbara and Michael have been at, I'm sure he will have done the same thing. So I think it's absolutely crucial that he loves James Bond, because this isn't passing the torch. This is like creating a new chapter in the franchise. He's the right age, like he says, where he grew up with James Bond, and he can remember that feeling probably of watching it as a kid and wanting to watch it on a Sunday. So I think he will take that into the film. I don't think he's going to be like I say, he's not deliberately trying to make whatever source material into a film into a dark. But like Blade Runner's pretty dark, isn't it? The first one. I don't mean dark, dark. I just mean it's not. It's fairly bleak, isn't it? And if
Mm.
as I always say, every future is dystopian. Nearly all the ones that are utopian turn out to not be. So that's another one of my. Uh, when it's a dystopian future though. Yeah, but they
Yeah.
all are, aren't they? But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so my point is that don't if you don't like his films, if you think they're a bit even the slow criticism, I don't. Again, if Chris was here, he would say, well, the Sam Mendes films were slow, but they weren't. They were slow because, come on, get on with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Denis Villeneuve's films are deliberately slow because they allow you to breathe. Well, not all of them, but like
Oh.
the Blade Runner, it's that world building. It's appropriate for that film, I think. So I don't buy that as a criticism at all. I think when he gets his hand on James Bond, do you think it'll be like a 2 hour 45?
The film length is a thing to consider
Yeah,
because
yeah,
obviously the most recent No Time to Die has pushed that
yeah, yeah.
to be. Um, I would.
But it was the ending,
I
wasn't it?
think. Yeah, I
I
think
know.
2 hours 45 is unlikely, but I think 2.5 is very possible.
I can live with that.
But like you say, there is this definition to be made between what's slow
Yeah,
and what's world building, and again, like you said with Spectre, for example, those patches of slowness in the film seem to be because there's not much going on and they need to stretch out, or they're trying to catch your attention and get a little bit of, prowess and acclaim. I really think in any of those films of Villeneuve's, like you might say Dune and Blade Runner, where some might say it's slow, it is deliberate for those films. It's not. You can't say the same for Prisoner. You can't say this Prisoners. You can't say the same for Sicario. They are ticking along with unbelievable tension from start to finish. It's a deliberate choice based on the story or like the world that's being created. So um, I'm not too bothered about that. I mean, the one hesitancy I have, maybe it's too early to talk about it, but since we're going there, wouldn't be pace, but more. And I've kind of mentioned it in other reviews. Is I know a lot of people love what Roger Deakins did with Skyfall, and what Roger Deakins has done with Villeneuve. I've, I'm a- just I'm wondering only by myself if that, as much as I love it and I love it in Villeneuve's films, there's something I don't know whether it's right for James Bond films in terms of to make cinematography so front and center. And there are times when it was done in Skyfall where it felt extra to the plot. It felt, unrelated. I think it's been necessary in Villeneuve's films because it's part of the world he's creating. If he does follow a very predictable pattern and he has Roger Deakins because the links are already there, that's one thing I just want to make sure that there isn't such emphasis on kind of cinematography. It's kind of been mentioned before. The cinematography in Bond has always been absolutely incredible. You've always been able to see amazing things on the camera on the big screen. But where you put the focus on cinematography, I want it all for Bond. I want it to be about character, story, and action. They should be what's captured best rather than the palette or whatever.
Roger Deakins, his impact on Denis Villeneuve's films has been amazing and crucial. I think he was one of the first people that was announced after when it was announced that Villeneuve was doing Blade Runner 2049. Roger Deakins was one of the first people that was, that he announced he was bringing in. um, I would say that he hasn't done all his films. He hasn't done the Dune films. He didn't do Arrival, so he's only done one of his last four films. Is that right? Um, so it might not be Deakins. Just because Deakins did Skyfall, he didn't return for Spectre. He might not want to do another Bond film. I think that there is still now. I think tastes and styles have changed a bit. Where maybe a lot of directors and even studios want more emphasis on cinematography and want emphasis on things that you can see. But it might just be me. I look at the current trailers for the new Superman film, and I don't like the way it looks. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but
Yeah.
there's something it looks quite pale and really close in and like weird. But I don't know, I know those are only going off trailers, but it looks like I can't anyway. But I'm just saying, I think be prepared that there will be some cinematography
Emphasis.
and
Yeah.
yeah, but it is quite hard to compare. Again, Sicario and Prisoners are probably more like the films because they're not sci-fi. And there are some very memorable shots in that, in both of those. But yeah, who knows? But I'm not sure. I'm not. I know people think that Roger Deakins will definitely come back because he did Skyfall and because he's often with Denis Villeneuve. But I don't think that's necessarily a given. I think Hans Zimmer would be more of a given. But we can come on to that. I just wanted to mention also about him being a Bond fan. So according to I think Wikipedia or somewhere else that I read, Villeneuve was approached for No Time to Die and he refused it on the basis that he was doing Dune. Now, wouldn't you have thought he had the perfect opportunity to say he he'll have to refuse this because he's doing Dune Messiah?
Mm.
So that tells me that a few things, if it's all true, and this is all, just me rambling, conjecture, whatever, that he obviously didn't feel either personally you know, or it was in the right place that he wanted to be the one to direct when James Bond dies and be stuck with all these things. Whereas now he's got a
Yeah.
fresh, plate to do anything. Well, not do anything, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he could have used doing June 3 as an excuse not to do it. Of course he could. And like I say, he doesn't need this for his CV, I don't think. It's clear. And if the fact that he's had to pitch as well, and he's gone as far as that, some directors might have thought, oh, I don't have to pitch to you, you know. But it sounds like that, that was part of it. So I do think those are interesting things and back up the fact that he clearly has a love for Bond.
Hello, this is George from Cinema Savvy. I am here to give some thoughts on the Denis Villeneuve Bond announcement. A massive thanks to Ray007 for asking me to send in a video. There's going to be so many interesting things to hear from with others, but short summed up, I'm buzzing at this announcement for Denis. I did not think he would be able to do a James Bond film. With Dune, obviously, Part 3 filming later this year. The fact he turned down No Time to Die back in, I think, 2017, they were first talking to him because he wanted to go and make Dune and do other films. He is a name that will draw people not to the franchise because Bond doesn't need that. Bond is bigger than any film actor or director. But what this does for Amazon's future as a film studio, a studio who are looking to make the break into theatrically released films, to have one of probably the two most in-demand directors in the world sign up to do a film for you, to be the person that relaunches Bond in a new era, a literal new era, away from Eon, under a new banner, it's probably the biggest possible coup that Amazon had. And I did not expect this from them, if I'm honest. There were some other great names that were rumoured, that were linked. I just thought that with him directing Dune Part 3, we're going to miss this window. They'll want to proceed. And I guess that's where we go. This is when will the Bond film come out? Does depend on varying reasons. Dune's release date, of course, the production and process of writing, making the Bond. Maybe he's been involved longer than you guys think. Obviously, announcements are kept very stum, but it looks great for the producers Pascal and Heyman that they've been able to lure in, again, one of the best directors working today. So I'm very excited. I hope others are. He's a director that gets the best out of his actors. He gets some of the best creatives involved working on his films with him. He shoots on IMAX. He projects it on film as well. So there'll be plenty of BFI IMAX strips, hopefully for 70mm. It's very exciting as a Bond fan. And I think I'm at ease now with the Amazon scenario where, Amazon haven't just brought in like a studio guy, someone that's just going to nod their head and say yes. They've brought in someone that's probably going to have a bit of creative power. They've brought in someone that can work with intellectual property, that can work with big producers. And in turn, they've got producers, the likes of Heyman, who have worked with other creatives, who have ran franchises, allowed directors to come on board, make their stamp and bring someone else in. So it is exciting. There's obviously going to be way more announcements to come, and obviously we don't know who Bond is yet or anything else involved, but it's safe to say we might see some familiar faces from Denis' work. Many of those have already been in Bond films, but it's just something very exciting. So I genuinely have no concerns this now. I cannot wait, but I'm happy to wait. They've got the right person, and I think this is a game changer for Amazon as a studio and for Bond in the near future.
Hey guys, I'm so sorry again that I can't be there for another get-together recording session to discuss more news from the world of James Bond. I'm coming to you sort of, obviously not live, but live for me, from a hotel room here in Hemel Hempstead, which I keep wanting to call He-Man Hempstead, for reasons I can't really describe. But I've got to get involved and send some excitement where the directorial appointment of Bond 26 is concerned. Just think for a minute where we were not long ago. Oh, this is bliss, isn't it? It's just wonderful. So we were nowhere a matter of months ago. Absolutely nowhere. Bond was dead. There was no movement whatsoever. Then we have the Amazon switcheroo, which people have their opinions on. I'm definitely of the category that would like progress rather than stagnation, or I don't know what the other word for I could describe what was going on. It was just, there was nothing happening. It was dead. So I was always very excited. And then I look at this appointment, and then it feels a bit like when a dormant football club or a dormant big football club makes a massive signing. This is a statement of intent for the future of James Bond. And I think just in doing this, they're safeguarding James Bond's future. This isn't a one-trick pony assignment, even if he does one film or 10 films. This is looking forward to the future, and I'm so thrilled about it. You've just appointed, here we have just appointed one of the, arguably one of the top 5 blockbuster filmmakers in the world. And if that's not a statement of intent, I don't know what is. What more could they do? Even if his movies are not to your taste, you can't deny that he's a blockbuster filmmaker that makes a ton of money and puts bums on seats in theatres everywhere. And you can't deny this is the kind of move that will keep this franchise moving forward, and is bold enough and big enough to say this, whatever they do next, is not just going to be a stopgap. It's not just going to be a small, let's just, keep it going in the interim or anything like that. No, this is a Denis Villeneuve movie. This is going to be huge. It's going to be massive. More than anything else, he clearly loves Bond. He clearly loves Bond, which I think a lot of the people who've been involved at the highest level of making these movies in recent years have either forgotten or it's not been a priority. This is wonderful. This guy loves Bond, clearly wanted the gig, and I think the fan base is being listened to. I think the fan base is being given a real treat here. I really do. More news will come, but this is Bond moving forward. We're moving past things like Bond's death, the apparent end of the franchise. I've seen some amazing stuff saying that people will no longer follow the franchise because it's no longer Eon. I feel sorry, I feel sorry for those people, much the way I assume those people feel sorry for me, that I found the last few years and few movies hard going. But this is just brilliant. I can't wait to see what they do. Bond is back. Bond is safeguarded. The more decisions get made, the more I feel like Bond is in safe hands. I think Villeneuve, that's that guy online, isn't it? Villeneuve will do all sorts to preserve the essence of Bond and make his own original, unique, compelling, classy take on it. I can't wait to see what happens next. I am in on this journey. I'm thrilled about it. And where do we go now? Casting, surely. Totally buzzing.
Speaking of Bond fans, being a Bond fan and all that, the reaction to announcement that he is the director, Tom, were you able kind of, as our man who kind of oversees the social channels and is very kind of tuned into not just what the media is saying, but what our friends, the Bond fans, are saying, what would you say that, the reception's been like for this news?
Well, the fact that it was on the BBC 6 o'clock news and then it was on the ITV news after that, as their, sort of, and finally kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure that's always done. I think the fact that it is him gives it a bit more clout. If it was an unknown director, it was probably to be announced, but it might have just been so and so has been announced as the new director. But it's acclaimed filmmaker Denis Villeneuve, who was responsible for Arrival and Dune, as he's going to direct the next Bond film, and that. So what about the new actor? And he goes on to. I know we can talk about that later, but I think there's just. I think I mean, I can tell you for people who how I found out. I mean, I was trying to get to sleep, and then my phone buzzed, and I just saw this "Whoa, guys" in a WhatsApp group, and I just assumed it was another clickbait based on that old news. So then to just have a look at it, and there were still people questioning, no, until Amazon announce it and the Bond account announce it, this is all rubbish, shut up. And I've seen a few comments like that on our own post. Yet, it was in Variety, it was on Yahoo, like you say, Harry, it was on all the no, this is like the press have got wind of it before the official announcement. And really, they all had the same quotes, didn't they? So these are proper quotes. These are genuine quotes. And how exciting, just thinking that Villeneuve, Heyman, and Pascal and Villeneuve's wife have been probably in a room like, oh, so how should we announce this? And really getting really excited for it, and can't wait till the genie's out of the bottle. But I think the initial reaction, my reaction, when you think, I was like, it's real. It's happening. Even though I'm not his biggest fan, I'm like, I can't, this is amazing. And the more I think about it, it's like, who else would you have that you can feel safe with? It's not going to be like even Christopher Nolan. There's the danger that because he'll be writing and stuff, and that I can't picture it being as much of a classic Bond film. I think Villeneuve will stick closer to the fun. You know what I mean? The sort of something that does have elements of the originals. But then I think the reaction from Bond fans, if you're a cinema fan, I think nearly everyone has been universally loving the news. It's just people who, I mean, not everyone's heard of him. I know that not a load of Bond fans. Just I want to watch the film. I don't really care who's directing it. So if they knew it was a Spielberg, someone babyish like that they've heard of, then maybe they'd be slightly interested. But they're like, well, come on, I want to know who's Bond now. It's a bit like when I told me and Jennifer told Gran that, look, Gran, can you see what's on Jennifer's hand? It's an engagement ring. Like, yes, but when are you getting married? So a few fans are like that. They're not. It doesn't really matter to them. They're only interested in the new Bond. But I think, like I say, to film fans, it's been mainly positive. I know there was like a Times article, wasn't there, that was really scathing and saying how boring his films are. I mean, notice it didn't mention Prisoners or Sicario in that. It was like, John, it's just, you can't compare sci-fi. I really don't think you can compare sci-fi films with this. So on the social media, I'd say 70-30. Is that a bit generous, do you think, in favour?
And I do think, just naturally, people would always react in a certain way to kind of watch how the world receives it and then go counter. Or go on, John, sorry.
So no, I just think 70-30, I'd take that, because when it was Amazon, it was about 20-80, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This is the thing, like with what's happening, it's all getting further and further back. Like the thought of the situation we were in with Bond dying at the end, no suggestion that they knew what to do next, stalling and stalling. Sometimes there's a bit of perspective, and then even like you've mentioned, John, the news that Amazon were getting involved, not greeted all that positively. Suddenly, like Tom's mentioned, it's on the headline news as and it's excitement, isn't it? It's people are up for it. They're looking forwards only now.
Well, actually, just in terms of social media and responses, it's sometimes hard to tell because how do you compare the number of comments? Quite a lot of the comments are negative, but then if 250 people have pressed like or love, then but
Yeah.
they haven't commented, or not all of them have. So that was just one of what I wanted to say. So there has been some negative, but I think there would be with any
Yeah.
filmmaker who was announced. People like different styles, so not everything is going to work for everybody. But yeah, when Amazon was announced, you're right. John said, yeah, it was like 2080 and stuff, and lots of quite sniffy comments and quite, oh, what do they know about making films? And oh, it's just going to be Moneypenny TV series, and
Yeah.
it's just going to be woke. Denis Ville,
No.
I can't, Denis Villeneuve is going to be our film
Yeah.
director. Like,
Yeah.
one of the biggest cinematic directors at the moment. So in some ways, it's a bit of a two fingers up to. I'm not saying that's why they did it, but as has been said, it's a clear statement of intent that cinema and Bond on the big screen is like the main focus for Amazon. That is a big thing, and this is saying, this is we mean business here, and also I do think, I feel I've always felt and felt a little bit less like this, and I didn't necessarily like it, that people were generally a little bit sneery about Bond. Um, Proper film fans, proper film goers, and then for some of them, a little bit. Oh, well, Daniel Craig. Oh, some of them might have been a bit more like, oh yeah, that's a bit better, or that, but still a little bit of sneeriness.
Yeah.
And then Villeneuve is announced as director. That's like, again, that's like, I don't know. I'm trying to remember, a bit like when Dr. Holland, our English teacher, who's a very posh, far back gentleman, said that he really enjoyed Home Alone 2.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
James Freeman in our class was like, "No, you didn't," because he sucked up to him, so he assumed that he wouldn't like that. Like, oh yes, a very funny film, but yeah. So it's just a bizarre analogy, but I'm
Oh,
sort of trying to say that Phil, it will turn other people towards Bond who perhaps have previously been sniffing. I'm not saying that necessarily they deserve such a film, but it will be interesting to see like that angle and how that goes down.
Mm.
it's a good point that you made, John, about the comparing it to the original reactions. If you think back to the three things that have happened now, it has gradually swung. It's swinging in their face.
Yeah.
So the first one was Bond ended in 2021. Like 1962 to 2021. Rest in peace.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous. And then Pascal. Oh, she ruined Spider-Man. I don't understand it. All these sort of things like David Heyman. Yes, what does he know about James Bond? That kind of thing. But it was slightly more positive because they didn't have as much dirt on him. But now, no one's been like, oh, they could have been like, oh, I don't like that one of his films. I don't like that one. If they were still feeling as negative,
Hmm.
but it is a two. You're right. I think it's two fingers up. It's the kind of appointment that those kind of people would have wanted. So if you don't like Amy Pascal, you don't like David Heyman, you don't like Jeff Bezos, well, they've handed it over to Denis Villeneuve. So shut up.
Yeah.
You've got to give credit to Amazon. You just got to.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when we did our initial video on it, I think we were all kind of like optimistic. We were like open-minded, optimistic. Let's see what happens. Well, we've got new producers and we've got new directors. We know that stuff's going on behind the scenes. They've already announced that they've been in London doing that. When did they officially take over? May?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were announced. I know they were announced. Was
It was
it
middle of Feb, I think, when it was
middle
announced,
of
or something like that.
February? So 4 months, you know.
Sorry, that was when Amazon got it, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so
but
4 months
yeah,
since Amazon got it. Okay. We've been waiting 5 years.
Yeah.
It.
I'm not trying to be like a smarty pants with it or anything like that, but I just think some people need to wind their neck in a bit, because they are coming in with a plan, and all the doom mongering around TV series of no, they're putting the film first. They're putting the film first, and they are making it the jewel in the crown, and they are getting the very, very, very best people they can for this, and they're doing it.
And really, they've always said that it's going to be film, as in they've been hinting at it heavily. Really, they've
And
never.
it's been said on this.
otherwise.
It's been said on our Bond. I
Yeah.
think it was, you know,
We're on the
Tom
right
and
side of
John.
history.
It's, you know what
Yeah.
John's just talked about, all the progress they've made. It makes you think like how frustrated they must have been in that partnership with Eon when they've got all these ideas, this size and this ambition, this vision for what the future of Bond could be like, but we're just getting nowhere before everything was stalling. They are now completely free and making so far excellent decisions. Um, we'll get on to maybe how this affects the casting of Bond, but there was one other name mentioned before, which was Hans Zimmer in terms of music, and he's worked with Villeneuve on the Dune films, and Blade Runner is where it started. I think Blade Runner 2049. They've been great scores, and for me, they've shown, even actually his previous films with Johan Johansson, it's shown to me that Villeneuve puts a lot of importance on music because all those soundtracks have been very purposely fitted to the film. They aren't generic sounds. It's not generic music in any way, shape, or form. They've all been to match the film, and they've ended up being wonderful soundtracks to listen to, really. And again, I've talked about cinematography. Music is another of my concerns about what people prioritize in the next Bond film. And I've said it lots. I go on about how I really want music to take much more of a center stage because it always was in the John Barry era. The songs and the music were something that people remembered for decades and decades. I would like it to get back to that place. And I do think, even though Zimmer's No Time to Die score is okay, I wouldn't, it's not my favorite by any means. I do think that Villeneuve himself has a lot of interest in the music matching the film, and he does have an established relationship with Zimmer, whereas Zimmer was brought in late in the day for No Time to Die. If it were to be Hans Zimmer, I would feel that Villeneuve would be starting the conversations now about the soundscape and what he would want it to sound like. And even if it wasn't Hans Zimmer, I think Villeneuve would be not just thinking about what things look like, but what it will sound like, this film. Do you guys think that it's pretty much odds on that Hans Zimmer would do the next one?
I think it's very likely, and almost him doing No Time to Die is incidental. That's almost coincidence.
Yeah.
If not Zimmer, then maybe, well, it might be like Zimmer and Benjamin Valfish or something, and then, he might take over or something like that. I would be surprised if it wasn't, because their collaboration and him, particularly for Dune, because I think for Blade Runner 2049, Zimmer came on later for that. But particularly for the two Dune films, he's been instrumental. Zimmer got, after how many, he got his second Oscar for that finally. So I would be surprised. And that partnership was big enough for the Nolan and Zimmer partnership to sort of end. And still think they're on good terms, by the way, because Zimmer had some documentary or film or something, and both Christopher Nolan and Denis Villeneuve were contributors to that. But anyway, So I would think it. I think it would be, and I think Amazon will want, and he will want the best people for it.
And don't worry, M. Night Shyamalan and James Newton Howard are still absolute best mates. I just don't understand why he doesn't do the films. But yeah, I think if you look at the
Remain.
I can't. This is why I get confused with the Nolan and the Villeneuve technical awards. They've all been like Deakins won, didn't he, for Blade Runner? He won another Oscar, but then Deakins hasn't worked with Hans Zimmer, and then Hoyt van Hoytema, I'm getting mixed up. He was with, and then Greg Fraser did win for Dune, and all the production design, visual effects, sound. I think sound. Both Dune films won Oscars. Even Arrivals won technical awards. It got loads of nominations for director. For these are sci-fi films. I mean, absolutely unheard of. I think, it's further down the line, Hans Zimmer, Well, it would be with Eon, I think. Like you say, Harry, they weren't by the end. After Sam Mendes got rid of David Arnold, they haven't really the Eon haven't really been as bothered about who's doing it. And I do think you're right that Hans Zimmer was coming to it late, wasn't he? No Time to Die.
Mhm.
And I think he was just like, well, I might never get the chance to do a Bond film, so I'm going to do
Mm.
it. So I think there is a good chance he'd do it. I think he will be given far more free reign and working with Denis Villeneuve rather than, of course, Cary Fukunaga had his own man, didn't he, to start with, and that for whatever we don't know whether that was his decision or Eon's decision. It wasn't quite right. And in fact, you famously never go back if you. Apart, actually, no. Howard Shaw did go back, didn't he, for the Hobbit series? But yeah. So yeah. I mean, these are sort of secondary
Yeah.
things, but I do agree with Harry. We love cue the music, and every time you see them, you're like, gosh, the music were the best thing about the whole
Yeah.
series. It's so good. It's so important. So I'm hoping that that is brought to the fore. I mean, come out, Denis Villeneuve is going to have a Bond song.
I know, yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
And
interesting because I
yeah.
think, sorry, the recent Bond films, they think they've been ticking the music box by just the song. That it's the music in the film that needs the emphasis for me. Yeah, so for Villeneuve to have a song is the more difficult thing to imagine.
Celine
Yeah,
Dion, French Canadian. Finally.
let's have it.
Don't want it. No.
Unless you want to talk about Zimmer more, that was mainly just a precursor, like I said, secondary to starting to now discuss who would Denis Villeneuve want as James Bond 007. I mean, we can only speculate at this point, but I mean, I was just thinking today, if you go through his films, he has had some absolute stars at the center of his films in
Mhm.
terms of like Ryan Gosling, Harrison Ford, Emily Blunt, who's now huge.
Mhm.
And then with the Dunes, he's created kind of Timothy Chalamet, but he was already on the rise before that. Amy Adams, these are big names. Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. He's always had a big central figure. For me, it therefore just made it slightly harder to picture the likes of like Edward Norton, not Edward Norton, sorry,
James Norton.
James Norton, yeah,
Harry, you've hit
or
the nail on the head.
Get him in a Bond film.
what Edward
Get him in.
Norton.
Let's get
Yeah.
Edward Norton in.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I mean,
But it
yeah.
just made it harder for me to picture Denis Villeneuve having. I mean, I'm not saying this wouldn't happen, but that idea of what's the name of the guy who I actually quite would fancy as Bond, a good-looking chap,
Theo
British
James, is
actor.
it?
Theo James, yeah, I quite
Yeah.
like his image. But it seems now that we've gone from thinking of a British TV actor to now we're thinking we're a
Yeah.
bit bigger than that now. We're on a bit of a bigger scale. I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you think the scale and the kind of perspective has changed on what kind of Bond will be in a Villeneuve film, John? You look like you've
I think that the whole aspect of the Amazon approach here is that they're creating a Legends 11. Like,
yeah, yeah.
I got to admit, with Villeneuve in charge, I can only see Aaron Taylor Johnson now. I've got to say,
Really?
yeah, he stands. I'm not saying he's my number one choice. He's the only one I can imagine in that now because because of that name aspect. Because yes, he does use names, and you're not going to develop someone for this. You are going to come out all guns blazing, and I'd love Cavill. He'd be my number one choice. I I I'm not sure about the age. I'm not. I think he could easily do it. It's not that I'm anti his age. I just don't think they'll go from that aspect of it. And in my mind, I can only see Aaron Taylor Johnson. And because there's June now as well, so production's not going to be till next year. It gives a bit more scope with the productions that he's currently doing.
Gosh, I really hope June is postponed. I mean, I will be depressed if we're waiting 3 years now. But that's an aside. Is he in the next June? Aaron Taylor Johnson.
I don't think so. Robert Pattinson was links. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. But
But
then
no,
if you've got one Batman, then Superman as well. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's wide open again, personally. I don't mean wide open in terms of the type of actor. I just mean Aaron Taylor Johnson. It must be 3 years ago since he was first mentioned, and I'm assuming that Denis' pitch was fairly recently, like definitely this year. So it would be not a coincidence, but a bit of one if, oh, actually, the guy you had, he would be in my pick, and I would have him doing this in these films. So I don't know. I think this is incredibly difficult to choose because most of his leads, of course, are American, aren't they?
yeah,
I can't assume that. I don't think they'd have an American.
No.
There is more of a chance they'll have an American, even though Villeneuve isn't French Canadian, like you say. I don't know. I mean, I do some of the actors he's like. It'd be great if Josh Brolin was, like a CIA,
Oh,
possibly baddie, the main baddie. That would be absolutely brilliant. We do
Wow.
need an American villain.
yeah.
It's, I know everyone says whenever they're asked, "Oh, I want a European psychopath," but yes, they're great. But we've had loads of them, haven't we? Let's have someone like that. That'd be and then the Bond girls, of course. You could speculate, but
Florence Pugh.
the guy.
I don't think not as much as someone like Christopher Nolan and certainly other directors. His casts do change,
Yeah,
and the
Yeah.
lead, apart from Jake Gyllenhaal being in both
yeah,
Prisoners and Enemy, the
yeah.
leads in his film have changed. I think
Yeah.
from film to film, as far as I can see, and then haven't returned. I don't think so. It's quite hard to tell, but yeah, he has certainly with Dune had a cast of stars, even in some of the some of the other films. But I think that's the main one where he's done that. Maybe that's because partly they weren't sure that the concept on its own would sell. But I don't know. I have no idea. I can see John's working there, but I don't know. Um, it's absolutely fascinating. This is the sort of thing where I'm like, I am really pleased that he's doing it, but I just can't picture what. Will he cast someone really famous as Q or something? I think there's less chance now of something that we wanted before, which is like Chris,
Reece
Chris,
Shakespeare.
British TV stars being, in the supporting roles. I'm not so sure that will happen. Might be wrong. If they're casting in the UK and, they've got a, casting director over here and stuff. But I just don't know. And yeah, and like you said, song, title, sequence. I mean, I am going to prepare myself that there won't be a gun barrel, but that's just for my own sake. There might be, but there might not be. So,
Not at the beginning.
yeah.
right.
Um,
Cinema and gun barrel, your standing ovation, right?
yeah, I know.
I think there will be. I
Well
think
done,
there will be
lads.
one at the beginning. I think
Given
I
what he
really
said of it.
want. I want him to be in charge, but I really want the producers to be like doing the.
Yeah, the non-negotiables.
Let's
Yeah,
have
we
the
bought.
best-
This is what we bought.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we're not going to.
Yeah,
Because it's the easiest way to get audiences along.
yeah.
The first thing you see.
Yeah,
So I
and
think that will
sometimes
go
you can
well.
include it in the trailer as well. Sorry, quickly,
Yeah.
like I don't know. I can just
Yeah,
picture.
they used to. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Tom, I interrupted you.
No, I think, but I think that's always applied. As I said, when Amazon took over, they will want the best people, and I think it'd be interesting to see whether he did have, like I say, somebody in mind for Bond when he did the pitch, or whether it was just a story sort of point or direction or tone or whatever. And then are Amy Pascal and David Heyman going to be involved in the casting? Because they should be, really. It shouldn't. It isn't. I know everyone says the director always chooses Bond, but that isn't true. Unless Cubby had wanted Sean Connery, I know it was his wife, wasn't it, who gave the green light. He wouldn't have been cast even if Terence Young wanted him. And I think it needs that person in the background. I think the difference is, as we say, we don't know whether they're around. It just says one at the moment, and then we'll see. So I think I would like it to be a group decision, and a long-term decision for because and everything he's saying in his statement, Villeneuve is ticking the boxes, isn't it, in terms of creating a new legacy. That I can't remember the phrase he uses. It's certainly not a one-off casting.
Mhm.
That's I doubt it'll be a one-off casting. I think it'll be
Mhm.
like the even like June. The actors they might not have been able to make another one. And I know it was always intended as two, and then this is a bonus one. But it wasn't clear cut, and I think getting them on those contracts will be something I suppose that would have to be negotiated, wouldn't it? That every new Bond has, maybe apart from Lazenby, has always signed up for more than one film, I think.
Lazenby signed up for more than one.
Yeah, yeah. And then he wanted they were going to extend it again, I think, weren't they? But yeah, so good.
It's you know, it just makes me think the way they're making and approaching this film just feels so different to the Eon days, whereas even though we it became quite clear that Eon didn't have a plan, we had a pretty sure idea of how they'd approach things. You could predict how they'd think, you'd predict how they'd recruit, and kind of knew what they're after. This is completely wide open. The other thing to mention as well, sorry, that's pretty important is the writing. Villeneuve isn't involved and isn't often involved. I think it's only June where he's been involved with some of the writing of his films. And again, if you're making that comparison with Christopher Nolan, I think you touched on it before, Tom.
Yeah.
Villeneuve isn't a writer, so he's going to be he's pitched an idea, but there will be writers, and I don't know where we're up to the writing because there have been articles that suggest a story has been written, but I've not seen that confirmed anyway. I don't know where that's coming from. And just like you say, Tom, I think that makes me believe that it will be more of a group effort because we've not got the writers yet. That's something they'll have to branch out with. Because there's no writers, Villeneuve will, kind of work with the producers on that. And I think you can kind of make the same comparison with the casting of Bond. When John was talking about Aaron Taylor-Johnson, then you, Tom, was saying, it's a bit of a coincidence. It could very well be that Villeneuve has this pitch of a character, maybe with an actor in mind, but then the producers say, "Yeah, we love your pitch.
Mhm.
Could you see any of these five actors? Because we're passionate about these five actors possibly being Bond. Which one of those, Denis, do you think would match your vision?" And then we're kind of working together. And that's when Aaron Taylor-Johnson might be one of their five,
Hmm.
and Villeneuve kind of says, "Yeah, he could do what I believe in." So I do think there will be more collaboration than perhaps than you like. Of course, you know Villeneuve's style and what you see on screen, but behind the scenes, he is a collaborator. Actually,
Yeah.
he doesn't do everything.
I don't think would you want apart from Nolan, would anyone want a writer director doing a bot? It's like Ryan Johnson doing Last Jedi. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
you open yourself to a bit of trouble.
Yeah, and the best directors in the world, like Steven Spielberg could write the screenplay for all his films, but he's so busy producing and thinking about everything else. And he'll think, well, I'll get my friend Tony Kushner usually at the moment to come in and write the scripts. And and of course David Kep, and there's so many people who can use. But that doesn't. He's still got the vision. But I know John Glenn. He's still got the vision of what he wants to do in his head, particularly the action. They're all his ideas, even if they were written on the screenplay with other people. But it's all a collaboration.
100%.
Yeah,
So and certainly Villeneuve will be involved in the writing process
Yeah.
at some point, and as an executive producer, which I know people might be saying we're hypocrites because we didn't like Daniel Craig being a co-producer.
Well,
This is slightly different though, and I think
it
it's
is different.
that's why I think it's more to pass the torch on for the next few, hopefully.
yeah. I do. I mean, we can't. There's not much to base it on, but it just makes me really believe that compared to Eon, where they'd have the writers, Purvis and Wade were even brought in as consultants for Bond 26. They were following the same pattern again, and a director would have to fit in and kind of, which is it's in some regards something we quite like maybe about the old films. But I do feel now the slate is completely blank, and they're not handing. I don't in appointing hiring Villeneuve. They're giving him loads and loads of power, but I really don't think they'll give him everything. I think in this you see that Amazon have a vision that appointing Villeneuve is part of their vision, and I think you'll see that with Bond, who they cast as Bond. Sorry, Matthew.
I
Yeah,
was going to say, and as we've said, this is the most important directorial decision potentially ever in the franchise. So it
yeah,
stands to reason that he would have perhaps more involvement in terms of the vision and everything. I do think there's a difference between that and Daniel Craig being given a co-producer credit and him being the one to suggest Sam Mendes and him being the one to suggest Phoebe Waller-Bridge and him saying that, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't see in now with like Denis Villeneuve that Aaron Taylor Johnson will come in and be telling them what they should be doing. And I mean, obviously that it isn't the comparator with Casino, it's
Yeah.
later on, but I'm still hopeful that that wouldn't be the case again, and that this whole thing is now bigger than the Bond actor will be.
This is almost exactly what an alternative universe now. Danny Boyle could have easily been chosen, I think. He ticks the same boxes as Villeneuve for me. He's not really done an action spectacle properly, has he? Yeah, there's something in his oeuvre that is like, yeah, he'd be able to do a good Bond.
Mhm.
And he uses Alex Garland, but he can write, of course, himself. I think I feel a bit sorry for him because I think if he'd have had Amazon producing his film, there's no way he would have been sat. That's the one thing, Harry. You asked what's the reaction been, and like, well, Danny Boyle got sacked, so don't count your chickens. But like, hang on, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that this isn't like the stewardship. It's a new stewardship. It's their first time, the producer's first time as well. It's a bit like Todd Bowley going in and getting rid of Potter. No, he appointed Potter, didn't he? Sorry, no, getting rid of Tuchel. It's not that kind of situation. I think they will go into it at the same time. There's nobody already in the door. There isn't already a Bond in the door. So
No.
I do think it's let's use each other's experience. Let's help each other, hold hands, produce the goods together. I think.
I think I'm excited as well because I do think that, as I said about sustainability before, I think you're going to be creating a framework for a team to work that collaboratively for years to come. I mean, that's what excites me is that
Yeah.
there's a bit of planning and thinking in this, I reckon, and that's why it won't be down to one director. You'll never get a director writing exclusively and doing it because it's going to be a team doing it. And I think that just going back to the original directors that were initially suggested, I think Paul King could certainly be someone who can come in for like number two or three
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
because it's like you need that big gun to set it up, to set the standard, to go, and then you can start. I don't want to say experimenting. That sounds really patronizing, but you know what I mean in terms.
yeah.
Yeah,
Trying new things.
trying new things. Absolutely. Um,
But within but within more the parameters that have sort of been set.
well, I think with someone like Paul King, 100%, because he's not a name. He is there to he's there to work with the vision of Amazon and the team,
Mm.
basically say, this is what we want to do, and I will do that job for you. He's not going to be coming in and going, no, no, this is what I'm going to do with James Bond. You need to just that's that. And I think that with the Villeneuve stuff is that at the start he'll have come in and they're going, yeah, we're on board with this. We see this. This is a vision. There's no conflict. Let's get this sorted. And when you know what, we're going to be co-producers together.
Mm.
That is a massive thing. The
Yeah.
fact that that is a massive thing that you think I'm putting enough trust in this that I'm going to put this guy and his wife as our co-producers. We're thinking this is a long-term thing. This isn't something.
Yeah. So if we go back to his quote in his statement, Denis Villeneuve, I intend to honour the tradition and open the path for many new missions to come. I mean, I've talked about, him declaring that he's a Bond fan being a wonderful thing compared to recent times. I don't even think the recent directors have talked about wanting to stick with it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh no.
Clearly, he's thinking beyond this film and they're working together on this. There is a greater vision. I'm going to I'll bring it to a close now, guys. But I think if you think about where we were not so long ago, it was pretty bleak, pretty worrying, pretty depressing to think that there might not be another Bond film, that it might fizzle out. They might make a conscious decision that we are deliberately not making any more Bond films because of how they went out with the final film. But just as the months now, and maybe even the weeks going ahead, are rolling over and things are moving, we are very much now on the path to Bond 26. It was big enough to get Pascal and to get Heyman. That was great, but we've had a director announced, and I do think in one of our episodes we talked about from that moment on, things will start to click because next it'll be the Bond actor who's cast, and then you hear the story, then there's a title reveal. Because if you think about it, Villeneuve hasn't had a press conference, he's not appeared in front of cameras. That will come when everything's together. So that's still to come, but you do think the intervals now between little updates is going to get shorter and shorter. There'll be more and more to come. And like I said, when I heard this news, Villeneuve, I'm a huge fan, but whether I wanted him for Bond was a thing for me to kind of wrestle with. During the course of the day, I've just got really, really excited about it. But just like our conversations on our episodes about Amazon and about Heyman and Pascal, just talking about it with you guys for what, an hour and a half or whatever it's been, just makes you realize what an exciting position we're in. It's kind of that great mix of, yes, there's loads of potential, it's like a blank canvas, but at the same time, there is that security of not necessarily we know what we're getting, but we're getting something. We are getting these are guarantees now. We're locked in, and that is something to be so excited about. I don't know if you guys, if before I want to read the whole statement from Villeneuve to close because it's just so exciting. But I don't know if there's anything you wanted to mention as a final thought to mark this significant moment in the history of Bond 26.
I totally agree with you, Harry. It's just that the statement doesn't mention we're going to get working on it right now or anything, and the
Yeah,
June thing. Those are just the things that worry me now.
yeah,
That doesn't mean I think, well, we should have chosen someone else then because was it June the first one, 2021, and then 2024? Like, do we really need one 2026? I mean, can we not wait a bit? But I suppose they want to go hot on the heels, and that it might be difficult if all the actors for that are all ready and raring to go filming. But as far as more, it's still more pre-production. Yeah, I think what you're absolutely right, and we have said it again before that people are like, oh, it'll take 2 or 3 years to film. Not to film, no, actual filming takes 8 months, absolute maximum usually.
yeah.
Occasional reshoots, which there's not usually been with Bond, to be fair. Maybe more recently there has been. So once that starts, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. I don't think this shoot will be taking as long as June or anything like that. I don't. It shouldn't do really. I think it's more. Can we get just that opening in the schedule when the stars align? We will. Yes, it's going to be late 2027. I think. Yeah, 2027. I've sort of made my peace with that now. I think it's going to have to be. I don't really want it to be 2028. It's ridiculous, really, isn't it? If it's 3 years from now, I know this is positive, I know, but
No, no.
that that's too long a wait for me. After
And
announcing a director, it would be
but
very odd.
I do think when I say news will trickle through now, I think a release date is one of those things that will come through. I think they'll let us know, and we'll see what's going on with Dune Messiah. It's not something that we're going to be in the dark with, and there might be a shade of disappointment because he is going to proceed with Dune Messiah first, but I don't think that's guaranteed. I don't know. There's just something pretty unusual and unique about them choosing him, even though he's in this situation. It's almost as if there's a bit of urgency here. He's
Yeah.
our number one man. We may have even,
Yeah.
there might even been a deal done where
And
this trumps Dune Messiah.
I mean, I do have those concerns as well, Tom. But, just thinking about it, you'd think from Amazon's point of view, they don't want to hang around too
No.
long. They'll want to get going with it, particularly having made an announcement like this.
Yeah.
We're thinking, we've announced the director, and then it's what, 3 years later or something. I don't know. And obviously, you don't know what might happen. Sorry. Just a few concluding thoughts. I think we'll have to be prepared that there might be some things we don't agree with. Maybe the title of the film, the casting, other appointments. But yeah, similar to what's been said, he wasn't my number one choice for Bond. However, I think this is unprecedented territory for Bond,
Mhm.
and this puts Bond in a place it's never been before, having such an accomplished, um, popular filmmaker at the head of it for this film at least, possibly beyond. I The future of Bond has sort of been secured here,
Yeah.
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 from
Yeah.
what I think. And no offense to Paul King or whoever else, it's just that little bit riskier. And if it falls flat, then it's like, right, what do we do next? Who do we turn to next? And you're not in as much of a position of strength. So I think this is incredibly exciting. There might be some ups and downs along the way. I know some people aren't his biggest fan, but I think that this, yeah, as I say, is such a strong position that we're in now, and that we should all um, be excited and get behind it. Because you know it's unlikely we'll feel this way again. You know what I mean. That will
Yeah.
The next time a director comes along, there'll have been another film made, and you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
this is
Very special
incredibly
moment. Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, 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 an important moment as a foreign and now also British Premier League manager would say.
I'm not that bothered for if he hangs about. Like it's not a prerequisite of a Bond director. Oh, I really want them to stay along for a trilogy or two or three. I'm not. The executive producer is more exciting. I think that is
Mm,
good because it is a clean break. I don't want a one-off person who's no investment in it. I think that gives him the investments. I think it really does. And he cares about Bond. He wants to put his mark on the
yeah.
franchise, not on the Denis Villeneuve CV as much.
Mm,
I think that's important. So, yeah, you're absolutely right, Harry. We've got it prepared. The casting of Bond might, when it comes, be not. Well, it won't. Someone's going to get offended, whoever it is, aren't they? It doesn't matter who it will be nowadays in terms of social media. Yes, I always say Pierce Brosnan was absolutely universally loved when he was cast, but there wasn't social media back then. They would have shown the clip of Taffin and gone, "What is this guy? You can't have this guy's Bond." And all. No, they would. They would. So we've got to brace ourselves for that. But when you know it's done by people who are loving it, you're going to give them that chance.
yeah,
We're really going to give whoever's cast a chance. And yeah, I think, as you say, look where we were even a year, 6 months ago. It was
Yeah.
absolute doldrums, wasn't it? The worse than 1994, really. That's what 93, 94, where
Yeah.
goodness knows what's going on. And yet, it could be 7 years wait between No Time to Die and this. But I do think when it gets going, I think they've done one. They'll have done one. We've got that blueprint going. We can bang them out every 2 or 3 years. I think after that.
Yeah. You got to remember that at the beginning of this year we did an episode on this called Impasse,
Yes.
yeah,
and flipping incredible where we're at. When
yeah,
it's comes
Yeah.
later. This directorial appointment to me makes me 99% convinced I am going to love James Bond 26.
Woo!
I can't see that
Yeah.
I can't see that I'm going to go into a cinema disappointed. I'm not saying it's going to be the best ever James Bond film, but I just know that I'm going to go and watch a film that's well made, that I enjoy, and it's not controversial. And I'm just like, yeah, bring it on. Absolutely, bring it on. Let's enjoy it. James Bond is different now. It's Amazon owned, and I think some people struggle with that idea that maybe they felt a bit of ownership with Eon because it was a smaller company and all the rest of it. And that's fair. I understand that. We are going to see bigger names attached to things because this is a massive studio thing now, and it's their special. It's their crown and their jewel in their crown, as I continually keep saying. But it is, and we're gonna love it. I think. I cannot wait for that day where we go to the cinema together to watch that film and not come out of the Rock shopping centre having to rant at 12 o'clock at night about the abomination we've just seen, but coming back just going, I love that.
Yeah.
I just love that. Did you see that action film? And speaking of action, any questions about Denis Villeneuve action? Go and watch Sicario and go and watch those incredible Mexican with the machine guns, those on the cartel on that going through the border pass stuff.
Yeah.
And the way that they get into Benicio del Toro's house.
Yeah.
Of course he can direct action,
Yeah.
There's some excellent fights in June and battles in June,
Yeah. I'm all for it. Yeah.
I mean, I just had a vision then, even though it just. But if you think like that feeling when John was talking about when we watch it at the cinema, that special moment, it'll be kind of that golden eye, when you first see Bond's footsteps running along the dam, and you're in. There's going to be a moment when this film starts and you're in. Villeneuve will create the world, and in a moment you'll feel it. And I mean, it's very, very exciting. Anyway, I said I was going to close with this quote, and I think it's just so important to get, we're talking about him. This is him talking to us as fans. Some of my earliest movie-going memories are connected to 007. I grew up watching James Bond films with my father. It's pretty touching. Ever since Dr. No with Sean Connery. I'm a die-hard Bond fan. To me, he's sacred territory. I intend to honour the tradition and open the path for many new missions to come. This is a massive responsibility, but also incredibly exciting for me and a huge honour. Get in there.
Cheer
Guys, who knows what episode 11 will be called, but I've absolutely loved episode 10, Denis Villeneuve. Who'd have thought, in the list of episodes that we have planned, episode 10, Denis Villeneuve. Guys, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. And like I said, like we said at the start, do follow us, because clearly things are going to be hotting up with the conversation now. Rumours circulating, and there'll be updates, there will be news. And we want to be there for you. We want to keep chatting about these things. So follow us, like, watch, all those things to support our podcast, Really 007. Thank you for supporting this one. And look forward to chatting again about Bond 26. See you later, guys.